joining us right now, both via Skype. Well, I think one via Zoom, one via Skype. Seth Dillon and Kristen Waggoner. You guys know Seth Dillon with the Babylon Bee, and Kristen Waggoner is President and CEO, General Counsel of ADF, which you guys know Alliance for Defending Freedom. And we've got them. We got a three-parter right here. It's good to see you both, Seth and Kristen. Thank you both so much for joining us. Seth, I'm gonna start with you first because I mean, I thought that actually was satire originally when you guys first said that Newsom was looking to ban what you were doing. And I thought, no, they're just picking a fight with Gavin Newsom. No, it was actually real. When did the left stop being funny?
Well, they're still funny.
Are
the
they?
thing is,
No.
I joke. Well, they're funny unintentionally. I joke all the time that it's the way to illustrate how difficult our job is right now in this insane world where real headlines seem like satire is you got to think of jokes that are funnier than what Democrats are doing in real life. You know, that's the challenge. When you watch, you talk about things that look like parody or they look like satire. That's every Kamala Harris speech or interview. It feels like it's satire. It feels like it was generated, like it's an AI deep fake we're stuffing funny words in her mouth. No, that's actually her talking. So it's the challenge of doing satire right now. It makes our job harder, not easier.
It does make it harder. And I was looking at this. What he originally targeted was this parody video of Kamala Harris, which he had said should be illegal. And this was back in July. And essentially what they were wanting to do was to take down anything that they could argue would harm or somehow endanger a candidate's electoral prospects. And they were saying that it was like intentionally misleading. Kristen, I want to go to you on this because, I mean, the purpose of satire isn't to explain that what you're doing is comedy. And it just seems like the whole crux of their argument just presupposes that everybody is too stupid to realize when something is a joke and when something isn't. I mean, maybe that goes true for some of the folks on the left, but I don't know anybody on the right who believes that.
Well, this is, by all accounts, a power grab by politicians to protect politicians during election season, which they've expanded to be over 6 months. So this is a roadmap for censorship. It is state-sponsored censorship. It not only kills the joke that the Babylon Bee and others are trying to make, but it is taking a hammer rather than a scalpel to take away the rights of Americans to debate in a political season. It's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, and how do you even prove, if you're Newsom, how would you even prove like that she was damaged by a funny, because I'm assuming you're the lawyer here, not me, but I'm assuming you would have to prove some kind of damages on that. How does that even, that's why this seems so ludicrous.
But you don't have to, Dana. I mean, this law is crazy in a million ways. So in terms of what the law does, it says that if there's digitally modified content and the government decides that there are parts of it that might be untrue and it might actually hurt a candidate's chances of getting elected, then anyone can sue that sees it. It also imposes potential liability for anyone that reposts it. So the whole goal of this is to censor debate, and it's not about whether something's true or false. It's about the government being able to tell Americans what ideas can be expressed in the middle of our elections.
And that makes it harder, Seth, to what you do as, I hate the phrase content creator, but I don't know how else to put it. When you're coming up with this, it makes it a little bit harder when you have all of these restrictions that are coming down on how you can move within comedy and within humor and what's fair game and what isn't. I mean, it is designed to be a chilling effect. I mean, if this was allowed to have stood, how would that have affected what you do?
Well, it's a problem that we faced for a long time because, we've been battling the fact checking and the claims that we're misinforming people on purpose for a while. And then it started shifting to this argument that we were engaged in hateful conduct. It was hate speech that we're publishing. That's why we got kicked off Twitter, was because we made a joke that was considered hateful conduct. And we actually had a conversation before we posted that joke. Should we post this? There might be some penalty for posting this. And I make this point all the time. This is exactly how they want you thinking before you speak. It's that if I say this, if I say this message at this particular time, will I have some kind of penalty? And that leads to people censoring themselves and engaging what I call, soft censorship, as opposed to them taking your content down. They're getting you to censor yourself before you even post it. And so I think a law like this, it'll have an effect on people like us. We would have every intention of continuing to post what we post, come what may, and then we would fight it out in the courts. But a lot of people are going to censor themselves and refuse to tell jokes that they think might lead to penalties or lawsuits or enforcement of some kind. And so it's absolutely intended, and whether it's intended or not, I think it is intended to, but whether it's intended to or not, it will chill speech for that reason.
I feel like that's already happening. Don't you think so, Seth? Like the rewiring of the American mind, and people are they're actually stopping to second guess themselves even over the most innocuous things?
Yeah, I mean, the soft censorship is happening 1,000,000 to 1 against the hard censorship. Most of the censorship that's happening right now in our culture is people who are refraining from speaking because they don't want to be canceled. They don't want to lose their platform. They'd rather go along to get along. And so we already have it with the policy enforcement that's there on these private platforms. When you layer on legal restrictions and enforcement of laws that could result in lawsuits, it gets that much worse, that much more intimidating. And so I think we'll only see increased levels of censorship if we don't continue to fight these things and assert our right to speak freely.
Now we're talking with Seth Dillon with the Babylon Bee, and also Kristen Waggoner, who's president and CEO of ADF. Kristen, there are already legal pathways to go after unprotected speech that is considered defamatory or slanderous or libel, or I mean there's specific categories time tested in the courtroom. What they act as though that is it because it's harder because and this proposal and what Newsom and Democrats wanted to do, they didn't want to meet that higher bar? Because I know it's really difficult to litigate those types of cases and bring them into the court. Or were they trying to make it, I mean, I know easier for censorship, but what did not exist that this law was providing for them?
There's nothing that didn't exist. There are laws in place that, intrusion of privacy, defamation if you engage in false speech. There's laws involving election fraud. All these things are already in place, which I think just exposes the motive behind this, which is that it's not about real harm to someone's reputation. And again, remember, these laws only protect the politicians, but it's actually that they don't want unflattering ideas or unflattering concepts to be out there about them. And you raise a great point, Dana, in terms of what is the harm. In these other areas of the law, you actually have to prove harm. But this California law says you don't even have to prove harm. You just have to prove that it might be likely. What kind of speech? How do you know if something impaired a political candidate's chances of getting elected? It's why it's so troubling and why the trial court has said this took a bulldozer to the First Amendment rights of citizens.
It's also telling that they went right after that Newsom was so worked up over a parody of Kamala Harris. You wonder, would he have been that worked up and be talking about how it needs to be illegal if it had been a parody of Trump that made Trump look bad? So it was. You can tell just from the content that triggered this thing. His response to it and them accelerating pushing this law through. That there's political bias at play here too.
Well, and these are also the individuals that were silent when you have Kathy Griffin with, a disembodied, bloodied head of Donald Trump, or when they've, some of the language that they have used in talking about conservatives. Apparently that's okay. But if it's in any way, ridicule's it's a very effective rhetoric. It really is. I mean, ridicule is a very effective form of rhetoric. And it's really hard for them to fight back against it. And Seth, to that point,
that's why I used the word you used the word dangerous earlier. Yeah, you used the word dangerous earlier. We are considered dangerous by the people whose ideas we challenge with mockery, which is, like you said, one of the most effective ways of challenging them. It is considered dangerous. And so they will often suggest that they are trying to protect people from harm when they're censoring comedy, that could be hurtful or damaging or something like that. But what they're really trying to protect is their ideas and their preferred politicians and their narratives. That's what they're trying to protect.
Yeah. Chris, let me ask you this. This suit, it seems like they knew that this was going to be unsuccessful in some part. But then I also wonder, I always try to look at what their other hand's doing when they're distracting you with the right hand. What's the left hand doing? Is this also designed to maybe put a roadblock or a hurdle in people's minds that maybe they'll think twice about doing something like what Seth and Babylon Bee does? Well, we don't want to poke the bear. We don't want to engage in expensive litigation or have all of our time taken up by litigation like this. So maybe we won't. It seems like that is also kind of an unintended effect that they wanted to inflict here.
Well, I mean, anytime you have to resort to litigation, that the process is part of the punishment, right? So I think you're spot on to suggest there's more going on. First of all, this law went into effect immediately upon Newsom's signature. Immediately. There was no waiting period. So there's no question they wanted it to affect this election cycle right away. And then the second thing is, there's no assurance that going into a trial court in California, you're going to get the kind of relief that we did. After all, it is California. And then you're taking it up through the Ninth Circuit. I think the fact that we got the relief that we did lets you know how egregious this violation is, how over the line it is. But keep in mind, we have to continue to litigate this. California hasn't dropped it yet, and it will continue to go through the system. That's why we're so thankful for Babylon Bee and other clients who are willing to stand up in this moment to say, I'm going to take the arrows, I'm going to take the distraction that it causes my business or what I'm doing, because this is that important.
Would it have gone this far if they were in Texas and not California?
If they were in Texas, the law would have never been passed.
Oh, now Seth, here's where we go. Now we got to start talking about getting you guys to relocate and come to Texas.
Well,
There's a
Dana, I
plan.
think it's important to realize that this law actually applies to all federal elections. So literally in Texas, if you're in Texas and you repost something, you can be sued under this California law in California. So this doesn't just inhibit the rights of California citizens. Now, they might have a defense, someone in Texas to say, the California court can't haul me in. But again, they got to defend themselves, which is the point.
Wow. Seth, wait a minute. I take that back. You caused problems for us now in Texas. We have to go to California. That is insane.